don't know that one. Let's get it on. Let me get rid of these lovely attempts at walking unlevel students through reading they did yesterday. Tell me that one. Are you from Tennessee?
Mm-hmm.
What's the response? What's the finish to it?
Because there's only 10 odds.
Oh!
You never heard that one?
I probably have. Boom! Other ones?
If you're a Pokemon, I choose you.
Okay.
Did it hurt when you fell from heaven?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's tons. You could absolutely kind of Google and have fun with it because it's almost like, joke books when you were a kid. Do you remember those where you pick it up and it would have like joke after joke after joke just written that you could use and you'd kind of laugh and be like, oh, these are fun. And then you remember none of them ever. There's always and they're really bad. Like your pants made out of mirror, your pants made out of a mirror because I see myself in a bad, terrible, bad things that you could say with this. But I want you to think how most of them are all based on, again, puns, things that we understand, these really bad kind of bits. But what's the intent behind the pickup line? Making them laugh. Does anybody honestly expect that they're going to get a date using just this line? No, your hope is to break the ice, to get the person to laugh, and then kind of engage from there. I know this is a weird place to start with this, but it's totally going to work. I want to give you a second to look up a word and a term that we really haven't discussed yet, but that is going to play big into today. It's a little difficult and it's a little involved. This is why I want to give you some time to kind of read and process before we talk about it so that you can kind of synthesize your understanding. I want you to look up metaphysical conceit and just read about it. And then we're going to come together to talk about what it is and then use a poem as a way to kind of show what it is, how it works, why we're talking about pickup lines, and what all this has to do with tone.
Is the Flea poem by John Donne?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm reading this. I'm reading about life as a conceits, and it's talking about a flea. So
Yes, that's what we're going to actually work with today, is that poem, which I figured you would probably come across this because usually if they're going to define the term for you or talk about it, this is the poem that they will bring up because one, it's easily understood, and two, it's super duper famous. So let's start to talk about that concept. Anybody feel confident to kind of explain, at least let's start here, what a conceit is before we get to the metaphysical part of it?
similar to metaphor.
Yes. But what differentiates it from a metaphor?
Is it lasts throughout the whole poem?
Yeah.
It's the main idea of a poem is to compare it to.
Yes. So think of it kind of like a super metaphor in a way. A conceit is a concept that you have to buy into to understand the meaning. It's controlling the entire poem. And so when we look at this now being a metaphysical conceit, can anybody kind of, based on your reading of the term, what is a metaphysical conceit?
It compares something that is like spiritual or like not physical, like you can touch, to something that is in the physical world.
Yeah, so it often takes something abstract, non-physical, and uses something physical. And often part of the metaphysical conceit is also creating this elaborate conceit, this controlling metaphor out of things that should not work together. And so tone often plays in because it's a little wacky. So separate poem that's actually not in your textbook this anymore, it used to be in the textbook, is another Donne poem, and you may have seen it brought up with metaphysical conceits, titled The Apparition. In the poem, Donne compares a thwarted lover to a ghost and basically says, because you have decided that you don't want to be with me, you have killed me and now made me a ghost, and I'm going to come back and haunt you. And I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to say, but it's going to be scary. But you know what? You could solve all this simply by coming back to me. And so he creates this whole metaphor that totally is all focused on fear and scary things. But the whole purpose of the conceit is to talk about love. It has these very involved kind of things that go with it. So we're going to work today with the Flea. You notice that in Canvas, there are a number of questions that go with this. We're going to work through them as we work today. But I printed copies of the poem just so that you could annotate it as you read, because we do want to get used to that. The AP test, is pencil and paper. There is no tech with it. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to read the poem. You will find it's not that difficult as opposed to a lot of the other poetry that we've read from Donne. This one, you're going to go, oh, I totally got it. I want to see what you come up with after a reading. And, consider, we know that we're going to look at two major things, the metaphysical conceit and tone. So kind of keep those things in mind as you're reading and what you notice. And then we will come together to kind of deconstruct and discuss in a few moments. Everybody had a chance to read it? Everybody feel okay with where we're at? Okay, I'm gonna put the poem up so that we can refer to it as we talk and discuss. It'll be small, but we'll make it work. That's what she said. So here with the poem. Let's start at the top. How would you define the metaphysical conceit of the poem?
Comparing a flea to the love between two people.
I'm gonna tell you yes on the flea. But we have to be more specific about the love between the two people, because are they in a relationship?
No.
Who wants to be?
The man.
The man. So what is he comparing the flea to?
Like a marriage, coming together, I think sleeping together is part
Yes.
of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where I wanted to be like, I know you know it. Like, we just have to be a little more specific. I want you to think of the flea as their consummated marriage bed. Now, in order to understand this, we do have to understand a little bit about Dunn's time period and how they viewed the act of sex. Remember that Dunn is working in like the 17th century. And so science doesn't exactly know what it's talking about. But at the time, science believed that when two people had sex, their blood literally mixed together. I know. So he's using that understanding of sex and using what fleas do. They bite and suck your blood. And so he watches a flea before the first stanza jump from him to her. Now, I understand how we view the concept of someone having fleas today. It is gross. It is disgusting. But remember that we are talking about the 17th century. Different time, different issues. This was not uncommon. So, but still, it wouldn't be like, think of it more like a mosquito. Okay. Would you view a mosquito biting you and then biting somebody else as gross?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
But would it be, compare it? I want you to think of it more like a mosquito than we would see a flea. Like fleas, we would be totally grossed out because we'd be like, ew, you're dirty. Ew, what's wrong with you? Ew. But instead, think about it like a mosquito. Mosquitoes do the same thing. They're just kind of around. In a Dunn's time period, fleas were around. It just was. It wasn't a symbol of like, ew, you're a dirty person. So, talk to me a little bit about what stood out to you. Now that we have the basics of the metaphysical conceit defined, what are things that you took note of with this poem? I want to start more broadly before I start to kind of guide towards some of the things that he's doing.
How the poem is, I guess, physically laid out, because there's the 3 lines at the end of each stanza that are like shifted to the right a little.
Okay.
So I knew it's for something.
Yes.
I wasn't sure exactly what.
Sometimes it's just the printed word, but if you notice, for example, here we have the yet as a shift. In stanza 2, we end that previous line with a period. And then down here in the 3rd stanza, we have a semicolon and the statement of "'tis true." So almost think about it as emphasizing a shift at the end of each stanza. But do you notice anything else about the construction of this poem? It's 3 blocks. When you read it, did you kind of see it as a story separated into 3 movements? So how would we define the first stanza? I kind of already told you what happens before the poem, so that sort of defines the first stanza if you're looking and going, isn't it just that? Yeah. He points out, look, there's a flea. It just bit me. Now it's biting you. So he defines for us some of what we have. What happens between stanza 1 and stanza 2?
He's starting to talk to the woman more about their actual relationship instead of about the flea.
Okay, he is focusing a bit more that, but if you had to think, what happens that prompts what he says in the first line? Oh, stay, 3 lives in 1 flea spare. Oh, stay would be equivalent to stop. Why is he telling her to stop? What is it that she's seemingly about to do?
She's like,
She's going to kill the flea. And so it forces him in stanza 2 to explain why she shouldn't. And then what happens between stanzas 2 and 3? She kills it. If you're like, how do we know? Look at how she talks about purpled thy nail. So if you flick a mosquito after it has bitten you, of course, you're going to see the blood that it has collected as it splats. Same thing here with the flea. Let's get a little into his argument. And this is where we see the development of this metaphysical conceit, but also the development of the tone in the piece. So let's start here in the first stanza. We got the first lines. I got it. It bit it. It bit me. And we get to our two bloods mingled be. What's his purpose in that first stanza? Yes, he points it out. But what is he trying to argue about the flea as their marriage bed, if we will, as though it is a consummation?
another one, where, although it's not official, I guess they go together.
Okay, and what does he have to say about that mingling in just the first stanza? What does he want her to understand?
It doesn't degrade her in any way. It's not because that like a sin nor shame nor loss of maidenhead.
Mm-hmm.
That's talking about like I guess her virginity.
Absolutely.
She's still like pristine and clean right now, even though they're.
Yes. So I want you to just think about what he is doing here. Logically, he is trying to argue that this flea has mixed our blood, yet we have committed no sin, no shame. You're still technically a virgin. So he's almost arguing, hey, you keep rebuffing me. You keep telling me, ain't gonna happen, dude. But hey, it's like we just slept together in what we have. Now, I get it. Most of you are looking at me like, really? He's trying to make the case that all is good. And remember, this is in some ways a seduction poem. Go back to how we started. Do we really expect any of these to work? But what are you hoping?
She'll maybe listen a little.
She'll listen a little. This is not a guy who is trying this on he's not shooting his first shot with her. Through the poem, there are definite moments that we could point to where he points out that he has been rebuffed before by her. But what's he hoping in pointing this out? I can get you to smile. I can get you to listen a little bit. Maybe this is the way to do it. Is it ridiculous? Absolutely. Is it supposed to work? No. So please do not go away from this poem thinking, man, this guy tried to make a whole thing about why they should have sex based on a flea. Like, people were weird back then. It's meant to be. Think about how we're mixing tones here. Is he serious? No. But if she said, okay, then fine, let's do it, would he be serious? Oh, yeah. And so you got to understand there's a lightsome quality to this, but there's also a sincerity. He makes his argument. And then notice what we have with your shift and bringing it in. We have, yet this enjoys before it woo. We get to mix the blood before marriage. And pampered swells with one blood made of two. And this, alas, is more than we would do. Anybody mark that pronoun? Think for a second based on what we know. Is we the best way to describe this statement? It more than we would do.
More than you would do.
You being he or she?
She.
So notice here, he's acknowledging like, yeah, we haven't done it, but there's that understood like, it's more than you would do. Like, come on, I'm ready. Like, come on. Let's switch. Now she goes to flick this. Why does he all of a sudden change his count here from 2 to 3?
So like have two on the poem.
Yeah, we're now including the flea. Like, don't do it. You're going to kill 3. You're going to kind of take all of these pieces where we almost, nay, more than married are. Could you be married and not have sex? Yeah. But he's saying we're more than married in that flea. Baby, our blood's together. You're going to take out more than that. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed and marriage temple is. We have again this statement of grudging. You've turned me down. Though parents grudge, and you were met and cloistered in these living walls of jet. Jet being the actual insect itself, the flea. He says, though you make act to kill me, let not to that self-murder added be, and sacrilege, 3 sins in killing 3. So he points out to her, not only would you be killing the flea, not only would you be killing our marriage, hey, you'd kind of be killing yourself too, because your blood's in there. Now again, is he expecting this to work? No. But is it a logical argument to make?
No.
I know where you're going, like, well, no, like this wouldn't work at all. Based on his understanding of sex, is his logic sound? It's ridiculous. It's absurd. Remember, it's a conceit. We have to buy into this to understand where he's going, but it helps to highlight the tone. His sincerity mixed with this kind of flippant nature. And we emphasize that flippant nature at the beginning of this 3rd stanza. Notice that it's framed as a question. Look at how he frames it. Cruel and sudden, hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence? There's a scolding quality to it, a mocking quality. I can't believe you did this. I explained to you that this flea is like our marriage bed, and you so quickly just killed it right away. He's wanting to, again, engage. Get her to laugh at some point. Get her to respond. Wherein could this flea guilty be except in that drop which it sucked from thee? All it did was suck your blood. It's what it does naturally. How dare you kill it for doing what's so natural? Yet thou triumphs and sayest that thou find'st not thyself, nor me the weaker now. You're all triumphant, and you're saying like, see, look, I took it out, and it didn't affect you. It didn't affect me. Huh. Turns it again. 'Tis true. Then learn how false fears be. What is this girl afraid of? Why? Because you're definitely on the right path. Think about it. He brings this up about fear. What is it that this girl is afraid of as far as he sees? Part of it is that he's telling the truth. Because before the conversation started, as he's trying to hit on her, what does she fear? We go back to the 1st stanza and we see it. Sin, shame, loss of maidenhood. I can't, if I give into these feelings for you, what if I lose my virginity? What if I do give it up? What if I have it? But she's also afraid that he's right. But guess what? You're so afraid of this, but really, didn't matter. Doesn't matter. Come on. So he says, just so much honor when thou yieldst to me will waste, as this flea's death took life from thee. You're going to waste all of this time. You're going to do this. Remember, even in the 17th century, when Donne is writing this, it's still a time of plague. It is the era of carpe diem poetry. Seize the day. And so when we look, think about how he's using a flea here in this poem to talk about experience. Yeah, it's silly. Yeah, it's absurd. But ultimately, this is a guy shooting his shot because he recognizes, hey, this might be the last chance I get. And yeah, I understand it's extreme. Yeah, I get that this is somewhat gross, but you know what? The logic works. And here A lot of times, some critics will look at this poem and kind of point out it is entertainment for the sake of entertainment, that there's really nothing of merit to this poem. But I think instead, you've got to look at the fact that it's like, yeah, it's entertaining, and that's the purpose. This guy knows it's not going to work. He knows that even when he introduces these concepts at the end, she's not all of a sudden going to be like, oh, you're right. You're totally right. Let's go and have sex right now. He knows that. But instead, this is that kind of bringing in of that carpe diem concept. Now, would a poem like this show up on the AP test? Nah, never. This is so widely read, they're not going to touch us with a 10-foot pole. But I will tell you, AP test loves John Donne. Oh, they love him for a couple of reasons. One, that metaphysical concept makes students have to engage in the poem to understand what's the figurative part of the metaphor? What are we comparing it to? And how does that complexity work? Think here. Yeah, we get it. The flea. But we're taking something insignificant, small, dirty, and using it to represent something that people really invest in from a religious perspective. Marriage, the act of sex, the possibility of sin, shame, and loss of maidenhood. So we're elevating it through this simple little comparison. Notice the complex approach to tone. This is a poem meant to woo this girl by using a flea. At times it uses humor, at times it mocks, but it also attempts to bring in fear and logic to this argument. And so it is a complex and developed approach to tone. When we're looking, the AP test loves to use John Donne for reasons like that. It really makes students stop and think. And where they love to use John Donne is on the multiple choice section. I'm going to say it, and I'm also going to knock on wood. I would almost put money on the table to guarantee that you would not have an essay based on a John Donne poem. Simply because Donne is too well studied, they wouldn't go there. Hopefully nobody comes back and is like, guess who was on question 1, Mr. Walsh? Usually Donne shows up on the multiple choice because it eats your time away, because it takes a lot of thought, but they can ask good questions about how these things are approached and developed. Make sense? So if we're looking, hey, what's a poem you could follow this one up with that we can still see the metaphysical conceit and we can still see the use of tone? Look for the apparition. Of course, apparition is another word for ghost if you're looking to just prep and get ready for the test. I'm going to stop there. Well, there. So